And good afternoon, everybody. Well, it is actually morning. I tell a slight little porcupine here. I'd like to welcome Cameron King from DWP in Kingston. This is a really interesting conversation which is going ahead at the moment, which is about the Kickstart scheme, which the government has put out. There's a lot of people doing a lot of hard work trying to pull the threads together with this. And Cameron has been really very encouraging and proactive with sharing to ourselves as a chamber and to other people in the community what the Kickstart scheme actually does for employers and for people who want to kind of register onto it. Cameron will kind of give you the overview setting for it. But just to begin with, the chamber has, I'm delighted to say that the chamber is now a gateway, an approved gateway to be representative for organisations. So out of this, if you've got further questions to what we're going to ask later, please get in contact with the chamber and we will pull this together. One thing which in previous conversations with Cameron, we are going to do a follow-up to this. So this has been evolving, some more questions come in. We try to put everything together. So less of me, now over to Cameron. Cameron's going to go through some of the slides. There has been a raft of questions which we've been pulling in, and we will kind of go through that a little bit later. So Cameron, welcome.
Forbes, thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. And I hope you're having a good Friday by the time you see this recording. We can't do it live for various reasons, which I won't bore you with. But I really appreciate the opportunity the Forbes and Amanda from the Chamber has given us as a department to be able to share some information around Kickstart, and hopefully we'll be able to enlighten you and provide some insights on how the scheme is going to work and how you can get involved if you're not involved already. Certainly, as Forbes says, this is an initial introduction perhaps for a lot of you. Some of you may have been working with the Chamber and other gateways potentially and have a lot of knowledge already. But today is designed to give you an overview, answer some questions. I do have a slide deck to show you and go through some of the major key features of the scheme. And at the end of that presentation, as Forbes said, he's going to ask questions that have come in from his own members and the Chamber's members. So thank you again for the opportunity to talk to you all. And again, the key message I will give you is that most of the information and guidance is available on the gov.uk website as well in the interim. So Forbes, I'm going to share my deck now with you. Sorry, Forbes. So again, grateful for the opportunity to join the expo today, Chessington Expo. Large community in Kingston, and I should imagine a lot of the employers from the Chessington area, but if not, from the wider Kingston business community. Now, the Kickstart scheme, although I'm pitching this presentation as a guide for employers, there may be people who've joined the expo that are just genuinely interested to find out more about the scheme. But essentially, the presentation today is from an employer's perspective. So the Kickstart scheme, the Chancellor announced in July, £2 billion worth of investment into creating work placements, which the government's going to fund for 16 to 24-year-olds. The government will be paying a minimum of 25 hours, or maximum of 25 hours at minimum wage. So whatever the minimum wage applies to the young person who applies for a particular Kickstart scheme, the government will cover a maximum of 25 hours of that, including national insurance contributions, and if it applies, the auto-enrollment pension payments of the young person concerned. Now, the scheme is designed to get our younger residents moving forward. What we have found, and what insight shows us from previous recessions and previous economic shocks, is that this particular age group is disproportionately affected, and hence the scheme we have put in place. Now, in terms of application processes and how the scheme will work and the pathways, I will cover that later in the presentation. But certainly the aspiration from the government is to be able to allow entry-level jobs for 16 to 24-year-olds. Now, you as an employer, if you're an employer listening, you an employer are required to provide some basic training. But the Kickstart jobs are designed to help the young person gain some work experience, explore your particular industry, and gain the confidence in finding and looking for work. And during the placement, the expectation would be that you would support the young person in looking for work, creating their CVs, and giving them general employability advice. There are funding streams that are available to help you support you with this, and organizations like the Kingston Chamber of Commerce, who are acting as a gateway, will support you around that. Certainly, in discussions with the Kingston Chamber and the Kingston Council and organizations like Kingston Adult Education, there is a huge enthusiasm for the Kickstart scheme. I was speaking to Forbes earlier. There's over 30 organizations that have registered an interest in using the chamber as a gateway. Now, you as an employer, you can choose a gateway if you have less than 30 places to offer. But in terms of how it works, you can make an application online through gov.uk, Kickstart. The guidance and information has been updated regularly. So since we started this journey with Forbes of the Chamber and Kingston Council, guidance has been improved and is changing all the time. And feedback, we are listening, the department is listening to the feedback from employers, and I'll cover some of that in a brief moment. But certainly, if you're interested, the first point of call I suggest you make is go to gov.uk, Kickstart, look at the online application process. Now, in terms of organization, one decision you need to make essentially is, do I have 30 placements to be able to offer? If yes, you can apply directly onto the gov.uk website in your own right, in your firm's own right. If you have less than 30 Kickstart placements, you would need to use gateway organizations like the Kingston Chamber of Commerce. Now, essentially, just to make the process a bit easier and to frame it, once your placements have been uploaded onto the central Kickstart system, the Job Centre plus Work Coach colleagues will be referring customers to the placements. But ultimately, the decision lies with the employers who they select from those referrals. So what I'd like everybody just to take cognizance of is the Kickstart jobs are just like any other jobs. And how they've been created is to give the young people who are needing help a real sense of what it is like to get work, apply for work, get feedback from interviews, get the usual work ethic and timekeeping in place to help them move forward, and obviously get some information about the pathways they have, and explore industries. Organizations that don't have the 30 placements, as I mentioned, we encourage you to look at the gov.uk website for the gateways. The Chamber have done Kingston Chamber have done a lot of work in engaging with the department, which we are grateful for, as well as a whole host of other gateways as well. So if you look at the Kickstart gov.uk site, there are a list of gateways geographically located that you can explore as well. Now, in terms of suitability of candidates, I thought I'd just spend a brief moment just giving you some information around the suitability and how we select and how you will select candidates. So essentially, the Kickstart scheme is designed for young people that can't find work independently. So give you some background in terms of a job centre environment, the caseloads we have, which have increased immeasurably, and just some general information for you. Since COVID struck, Kingston Job Centre has had 148% increase in caseload. So my colleagues are working hard. The caseloads more than doubled, and the same applies to this particular age group. Now, candidates that are getting interviews and perhaps have apprenticeship schemes coming up or assessments coming up or about to start studying, the Kickstart scheme is not designed for those youngsters. It's designed for those youngsters who are furthest away from the job market and are likely to be unemployed for a long time. Now, certainly the expectation from the department and from the government is, should you take on a candidate, we are going to be paying every employer, whether it's via the gateway or directly, £1,500 towards setup costs as well as training. Now, what is key to what I've just said now is to set up costs and for training. Now, the research and insight we have from HR professional, it does cost around £2,000 to onboard somebody into an organization, generally speaking. So that £1,500, you as an employer needs to think how you're going to allocate that in terms of onboarding a particular young person. So as an example, if it's a construction-based organization, you're responsible for PPE, you could use that £1,500 to buy safety boots and ballistic trousers, safety trousers, etc., hard hats, etc. If you're in hospitality, you could use that money to support the youngster to buy a uniform. If you are tech-based and you feel in time that the young person could do with some remote working and it suits them for the placement, you could buy a laptop out of the £1,500. Those are just a couple of examples I wanted to give you. Now, in terms of referral process, so if I use the Kingston Chamber as an example, so you've registered with the Kingston Chamber as an employer, you've given the Chamber all your job descriptions and how you would like the young person to apply. In the job center environment, when a work coach goes onto our UC Universal Credit system, they will see your job linked to the postcode and will refer customers to that. When the work coach refers a customer to a placement, all the job description and application process information is attached to that particular opportunity. Now, the work coach will discuss it with the young person, make sure they're willing to apply, firstly, and secondly, then refer them and give them the information they're required to complete the application. It's up to the customer then to complete that application, and it's up to you, the employer, to then assess those applications as they come in and then arrange the interviews directly with the candidates. It's an open and fair recruitment process. You as an employer will still have the ability, and we actually encourage that to take place. You choose the candidate. What I would like to ask employers, and what the government is expecting, because it's going to be an example of real life work, there's going to be situations where young people are going to be rejected. So building up that resilience for them, giving them feedback from an interview is something that's very important and something that's we are working hard on trying to prepare customers for. Within the job center environment, our work coaches will prepare the young people as best as possible, and there are various ways we do that in terms of organizations that do free training, employability support. Now, you may have heard the term around wraparound support, and the discussions with Forbes and Amanda and the rest of the chamber team, as well as Kingston Council and further education organizations, the wraparound support is important. So if you're an employer and you are going to make a bid in your own right, you need to set out how you're going to support the young person in terms of their employability training, their skills, etc. So a bit of feedback we've had from the first round of applications. Those organizations that have been declined, there are three levels within the application process. There's the financial, there's the wraparound support, and of course, you need to give evidence that you are creating new jobs. One thing I would like to emphasize, these need to be new jobs, newly created, not part of existing recruitment schemes and not replacing existing colleagues or colleagues who have recently been made redundant or been made redundant and then replaced with Kickstart placements. So you need to give thought about how you're going to give that information to the chamber if you're going to be using the Kingston Chamber as a gateway. But also if you apply as an employer in your own right, the key element of the Kickstart placement is the wraparound training support. Now, again, in discussions with multiple boroughs across London, the £1,500 that is paid towards setup costs and training, remember the setup costs. The £1,500 is not just for the training. So you as an employer, the government recognizes that there's going to be a cost involved. You need to decide how you're going to allocate that particular bit of funding. So again, just to summarize in terms of the placements, cannot replace existing or planned vacancies, and you cannot, the scheme is not designed to replace contractors or reduce hours of existing colleagues. It's in addition to that. One thing I've got to mention as well is all normal human resource laws and regulations apply. The Equality Act 2010 applies, the recruitment processes apply. You as an employer will treat the young person who comes on their placement just like any other employee. Now, again, just to summarize, the government will pay 100% of the minimum wage applicable to that particular young person. If you want to pay them more, that's fine, which is fantastic, but the government will only pay the applicable minimum wage for that particular person. Now, in terms of national insurance contributions and the payments, generally speaking, what will happen is once a person has started a placement, we will start making payments through real-time earnings attached to payroll HMRC. So like a normal universal credit processes, once somebody starts a job, us as the department know that they have started a job and receiving earnings through HMRC. So smaller businesses who are perhaps looking at employing somebody for the first time, perhaps, or, speak to Forbes and the Chamber team about, and organizations like the Federation of Small Businesses about getting help around setting up payroll, etc. There is guidance on the gov.uk website, Kickstart. There is guidance on there about employing people for the first time as well. So I'll encourage you to look at that as well. Now, the bottom section of the slide I've got on the screen at the moment, all bids should include how you will help the participants. So in terms of that, remember what I said in the beginning? This is to help those who are furthest away from the job market. So we have young people who perhaps haven't got CVs, who haven't got any work experience, haven't done the Saturday jobs. So we're not expecting the finished article, and I'm sure you aren't either. So when we're advising customers in the job centre, we do have wraparound support in the job centre normally, creating CVs, National Career Service advisors, a whole host of partners. The last time I looked at our intranet, we have about 120 partners that are linked with helping young people towards moving forward in their career. So the opportunities and the range of opportunities and support available are vast and varied. But in terms of the support you can offer is giving that young person the confidence to either enter the industry or enter and remain perhaps within your firm. It would be fantastic at the end of the 6 months. Remember, the placement is a maximum 6 months. At the end of the 6 months, if you feel you're in a position that you can take on the young person who's been referred by the job centre, that's fantastic. But the expectation is, and the messaging is, it's initially for 6 months. Now, in terms of training and skills and mentoring, you as the employer decide how to do that. And I do know Forbes and the Chamber are working hard on putting a package of wraparound support available to you for you to tap into. And I do know they're working with organizations like I mentioned earlier, the Kingston Adult Education College. They're looking to design packages specifically for Kickstart. So those are the type of avenues you can explore in terms of the wraparound support. But the key message is you as the employer decide how you are going to spend that £1,500 supporting the young person. Now, what I found with other seminars we've done recently, and again, in an ideal world, we would be live with you on Friday afternoon. But what I have done is I've given Forbes a range of questions that have come from other seminars we've conducted, and Forbes is going to answer these questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. And certainly, as he mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, we will do a follow-up session to the wider community, not just to chamber members, but we will circulate that upskilling session for employers very soon. But I'm welcome to take any questions now, Forbes. And again, the last thing I'd like to say, I'd encourage you, please do explore gov.uk Kickstart to find out some more specific guidance. Thank you, Forbes.
Thank you very much, Cameron. Would you mind just taking the slide down at this point? I'm afraid you burst my bubble in terms of making me sound intelligent with the questions by saying that we've collated these questions in advance. But thank you, Cameron. I know that you and your team have been working incredibly hard. This has been what I call quite fluid situation, and you've been responding and been very extremely helpful with this. When I speak on other London local chambers, it's really heartening to hear how Kingston seems to be kind of one step ahead. So fantastic work that you are all doing there, so thank you. Yes, there are some questions. Some of these questions do kind of slightly overlap a little bit from what Cameron has said. So if you can bear with us, I think all these things just give extra layers of information that we need. I'll start with the kind of a universal question, which has come out quite often, is basically, is the training to be included in the 25 hours or should it be outside of it? How should a business utilize this?
The expectation that the training and support will be included in those 25 hours.
Okay, good.
So if an employer, 25 hours, 5 hours a week for 5 days, it's up to the employer you have the freedom as an employer to dictate not dictate, but to suggest to the candidate how you want their working week to be made up. So if you as an organization and you as an employer feel that early in the morning, you need to get your head around your inbox and you feel that it's probably better for the young person to start at 10 o'clock in the morning and finish at 3, that's a decision you can decide with the young person. Now, ultimately, training and encouraging, the government is paying for 25 hours, but I would expect on the ground a young person chatting to an employer who's getting the ability to perhaps to participate in a free course. If they're going to be doing 4 days, perhaps work and then Friday do a course, then that's entirely up to the employer and the participant.
Thank you. And I would like to add to this is that in our conversations we've had with Kingston Adult Education, there are a number, and I'm sure it's the same for you, Cameron, there's with their programs which they've been talking about, they are kind of rolling. So there isn't kind of a prescriptive, it has to be at this time and everything else. It's a very rolling scheme because as Kickstart rolls out, none of the training is going to happen on a universal same point. It's each employer needs to allow this person to train when it's convenient for them. So there is a lot of flexibility with the wraparound support, which is becoming available. So it's trying to, it's not a hindrance, it's supposed to help employers and for the people who are working.
100%, Forbes. And I think what you said there is very key. It needs to be a measured approach to inducting a candidate. The employees need to get to know the candidates, need to understand from the candidates where they're at in their own journey. And, we're not going to prescribe to employees, your business best, perhaps you've employed other people and you've inducted and trained people. So we would expect and encourage employers to use their own initiative in creating a plan. But in terms of organizations like Kingston Adult Education, what is important is the ability for young people to drop in and drop out of learning. And there are a range of opportunities available. Actually, just on that, I'm working with a national partner at the moment around a mentoring scheme where we're looking to pilot it in Kingston actually, and talking about the work we're doing in Kingston. I'm a Kingston resident, I have been for 12 years, and I'm passionate about the area. And although I lead on Kickstart in West London, Kingston has always, in my view, led in a lot of ways in terms of the engagement with the job centre and supporting universal credit. But in terms of the mentoring platform, which I will share with Forbes and Amanda in the chamber later when it's ready to launch, it'll be a facility where a young person can join the platform and get a mentor from a related industry. So if you as an employer are finding it difficult to spend time or perhaps don't have the knowledge, we are going to, as a department, and I think it's incumbent on the department to be able to offer a range of additional supporting measures. So 100% Forbes, that is the idea.
Okay, thank you, Cameron. The next two are kind of on a slight financial avenue. When is the £1,500 paid to the employer?
All right, good question. So that the current guidelines is that will be paid with you within the first sort of 6 days of somebody starting a placement. Okay. So if an employer is using a gateway such as the chamber, the chamber and all gateways get £300 administration fee from administering the whole process per placement. So what the government will do will pay. If I use your organisation as an example, Forbes, the government will pay you the £1,800 for that particular start, and the £1,500 you pass on to the employer.
Okay, thank you, Cameron. And then further to that, from the employer's point of view, when are the wages paid? What's the process of, they obviously pay the employee, and then how does that all work?
That is the key.
So, as we currently understand it.
Yes, and how it's going to work is, again, essentially, candidates need to be on firms' payrolls through PAYE. So what will happen is, within the sixth week of a placement, so generally speaking, universal credit, there's 5 week periods taken into account, and is linked to real-time earnings through HMRC. So once the department sees a payment come through payroll for that particular candidate, the wages are then released and paid directly to the employer, or paid directly to the gateway, to who then you will pass on to the employers.
Okay, thank you. I know that has changed quite a bit from about almost 3 weeks ago,
Yeah.
and I think
and
still some probably greater tweaking.
And in the discussions with Kingston Council and yourselves and a few other partners, that's the type of feedback we've taken on board. And I think I'd like to say, look, it's not, nothing's perfect. I'm not going to sit here and say everything's perfect, but the feedback we've got from small, medium enterprises is that you can't wait 6 weeks for payments, and you can't wait for any 2 or 3 payments. So that's feedback we've taken on board. We've adjusted the system, and it's now going to be paid monthly.
Thank you. There's a slightly broader question. It goes back to the wraparound. As best as you are aware of at the moment, who kind of essentially takes the final responsibility of that attendee, kind of the employee coming in? So if we did say, for example, in the chamber, we took on somebody, we used the wraparound, we went to Kingston Adult Education, and they followed that through. Does KE kind of come back to the employer and we feed that information back up? Who kind of just checks that the training is going ahead? Is that in part of the earlier bid questions? How is that reported?
Yeah, importantly, yes, it is very much forms part of the bid process. So whether you're applying as an employer in your own right, 30 placements and more, less than 30 placements, you go through a gateway. So that is the information we require as the government to assess your bid. You need to be able to outline how you are going to support the young person in terms of wraparound support. In terms of accessing wraparound support, you as the employer, it's your decision on who you engage to support that particular placement. We as a department we're not in a position to recommend or authorize or endorse any particular learning organizations or training organizations. That needs to be down to the employer to choose the right appropriate training for that particular individual. However, having said that, the work that you as the chamber are doing with Kingston Adult Education and Kingston Council, etc., and obviously some of the information we've supplied to you from our Open University scheme, those are options for employers to use. And I stress this: employers need options for the wraparound support. However, organizations like further education colleges, like Kingston Adult Education, they are skilled in working with young people, and particularly around the employability piece. So I would encourage employers to look at what is on offer and make the appropriate bookings and look at the candidate, what's best for the candidate. And the money, so in terms of payments and money of the wraparound support, the £1,500 is paid to the employer directly, or it's paid to the gateway. If an employer has an agreement with a particular gateway around wraparound support, that agreement is between the employer and the gateway.
Fine.
And I would encourage.
And then just just for clarification, the actual, so end of month 1, month 2, does the employer need to say to who they've done this amount of training, or is it kind of just at the end of the 6 months they say they've had wraparound training? How does that's what I'm trying to get at, is that reporting during that 6 months?
To put you all at ease, there's no reporting needed in terms of the wraparound support and appraisals of how the young person is progressing. Us as a job center network will be engaging with a young person anyway. So our work coaches will be checking in regularly with the young people to find out directly from the young person how things are going. There's no expectation for employers to feedback on any appraisals, or we don't need progress reports in terms of training. That will become apparent when we engage with the youngster concerned.
Thank you, Cameron, because I think that is quite a big point for employers, particularly as you say, they're taking that responsibility. They just need to know sort of where they're having to report their margins here.
And I think it's not government's place to dictate how employers conduct their training and induction and upskilling. So I'll just to put that out there.
Okay. I'm conscious of the time, so there's a kind of a two-part question to this. Is what happens if I don't have a vacancy at the end of 6 months? And then also what happens if I do have a vacancy at the end of the 6 months?
If you don't have a vacancy at the end of the 6 months, that's the expectation from the outset. If you do have a vacancy, as an employment advisor within the network, that'd be first prize. Means you get the placement being a success, and you create a vacancy, and that's something that ultimately would be fantastic. But the expectation is the placement is only for 6 months. But the other expectation, having said that, is that you put the youngster in a position then to move forward to perhaps another organization, or you've given the youngster an opportunity now to explore and further themselves after the 6 months. And I think what's important as well, one thing I want to mention, I know we're running out of time, but one thing I want to mention is the funding for Kickstart Scheme is presently up until the end of 2021. So what we are looking at is the last placements being completed in the summer of 2022. So those of you on this particular webinar, there's no screaming rush at the moment. There's time to get your ducks in a row, as it were. But certainly, there's a lot of work and a lot of employees that are very engaged with the chamber that are ready. But don't feel that if you're not in a place just yet. I would encourage you to look at the guidance, look at your own business at the moment, and see how you can perhaps accommodate a young person.
Thank you, Cameron. It's a very, very important note about the mad rush, which is what I'm hearing from other chambers. One final question then really is a practical process. Is if a candidate does drop out, and we are talking about a very complex kind of temperament coming in here at that age range. So this wouldn't be a surprise. So if a candidate does drop out or leaves, can I replace them? And then there's also the implication, will I get another £1,500 if I had to get somebody else in?
All right, first part of your question, the age group we're dealing with, we're wanting to help the hardest, those furthest from the job market. We are going to get, like normal recruitment processes, we're going to get people perhaps starting on a Monday and not finishing the week, or finishing halfway through. That is normal recruitment, and that's something we're going to need to bear in mind. Second part to your question is, certainly you can replace the candidate and re-advertise the vacancy, and within reason, and as long as it's not abused, the department will pay an additional £1,500 to support the next candidate. But in terms of compliance and auditing, those payments would be checked and audited to make sure that there's no misuse in terms of that £1,500. Now, in terms of customers starting and finishing, we may have a situation, and you know, let's just be open and honest about it. A young person may start a Kickstart scheme and find a better paid role somewhere else in an industry that they're aspiring to. So those situations are going to apply, and normal HR processes and rules and regulations apply, Forbes.
Grand. Thank you, Cameron. I'm conscious of the time with this. This is really a starter. There are going to be more questions coming through. We will be answering them. I think this is a fantastic opportunity, which Cameron has explained. I do encourage employees, if you can do this, I think it can work both ways. It can be great for the employer to sort of just see if they can expand their business, to get the skills in. I think it does give the opportunity to people who are at the sharp end of all of this. There are fantastic wrap-round businesses and organisations in Kingston. DWP are working hard, as I say, to support these people and employers. So we're trying to create this relationship which is going to work. From a chamber point of view, I'm delighted at the feedback and the response from a lot of our members. We want to push this further. Our duty will be to kind of do the due diligence, make sure that nobody's wasting their time, and to really make this work. But this is going to be a start. We'll probably see Cameron shortly on another webinar for more businesses as we progress. But for the time being, thank you for listening in. I hope this has been constructive and helpful and actually positive. You want to go away and think, I want to go and do this now. There's a lot of scope with this, and there is a lot of support to try and make this work. So Cameron, thank you so much for your time. I'm sure we will see you shortly, and we'll speak to you very soon. Thank you.
Pleasure, Forbes, and everybody on the call. I hope you enjoy the rest of the expo. Thank you, Forbes.
Thank you. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.